Okay, guys, we're looking at question 2 on your free response 2 assignment. And this is a little bit tricky because we're talking about real interest rates and the supply and demand for what we're going to call loanable funds. This just says funds, but if you look at your sheet, your study sheet, that graph, I've actually got it right here. It's really more accurate to say loanable funds. That makes it a little more understandable and clear. Okay, so that's the beginning of this whole thing. Now, these are the graphs that you can draw to start to answer this question. Because let's just back up here. So what's going to happen is we want to look at this market for loanable funds in a country. We'll call this the U.S. just to make it easier. And we want to assume that the country is going to increase their deficit spending. And we want to explain how the increase in deficit spending will affect the real interest rate. So what you can do is you can draw one of two, you can say one of two things, because what's going to happen is when the government borrows money, when they want to increase their deficit spending by borrowing, we're going to do two things. The supply of money is going to decrease because the government is using it up. So you're going to have a leftward shift in the supply of loanable funds, and because the government is increasing its deficit spending, it needs to borrow money. So it's going to be demanding loanable funds. So you're going to also have a rightward shift of the demand for loanable funds, and both of these will cause the real interest rate to go up, as you can see. So either one of these two or both would be correct. So you're going to have a rightward shift in the demand and a leftward shift in supply, which is going to cause the real interest rate in this economy to go up. Now, we're thinking in terms of the demand and the supply of loanable funds here. Okay, so don't get that mixed up with something else. And I'll explain that in a minute. Okay, so now we've answered part 2A, and part B now. If the interest rate, real interest rate, goes up, what is that going to do to investment? Well, it's going to cause it to actually drop because investment require. Now, this type of investment. Now, this is where it's confusing. You got to remember the perspective. This type of investment in plant and equipment normally requires a company or a firm or a person on their own. If it's just if you want to buy a house, right, and you want to invest. Well, this is going to require borrowing. This type of investment. So when if any one of us decides, we want to buy a house, we look at that as a long-term investment, but in order to buy the house, we need to borrow the money. So when the interest rates go up, we're less likely, and I want to jump back over here. So when interest rates go up, we're less likely to buy a house, or we might buy a smaller house, or we might not buy a second house, things like that. So you're thinking in terms here of, when we talk about investment here, we're talking about this idea that the investor needs to borrow the funds in order to invest in the capital, which could be a factory, or more land, or more machinery, more things like that. Okay. Now, where were we here? Let me jump back to where we were. Whoa, sorry guys. Now, actually, I wanted to come back over to here to the actual question. Okay, so what's going to happen? So just to reiterate, that's in part B there. the investment in plants and equipment would drop because it would become more expensive to borrow the money to do that. Okay. C, explain how the real interest rate change you identified up here will affect long-term economic growth. Well, that's simple. If we go back here and we've already determined that investment in plant and capital is going to drop, so a domestic investment is going to drop. And if we go to our basic formula, which I have here somewhere, right here, if investment drops, then that's really going to cause a leftward shift of aggregate demand. But you don't even have to use the graph. You can just see that if I goes down and I is a component, or investment is a component of Y output or the GDP, if this drops, then we can say that we have lower or a decrease or a slowdown in economic growth. Let's see. So we can say that long-term, let's go back to what they're actually asking here. So we can say that long-term economic growth will slow down or decrease, okay? That's part C. Now, D, this is where it gets tricky, because now we want to explain how the real interest rate change we identified up here in part A, which we identified, let's just back up and just show that right here with these two graphs, right? When we have a leftward shift here and a rightward shift here, it's going to cause the real interest rate to go up. So that's where we are. Well, when that happens, how is it going to affect the following in the foreign exchange market? Okay. Well, we want to say that the real interest rate, that the fact that the real interest rate goes up, that's going to cause that the demand for, and if we call this the U.S. economy, it's going to cause the demand for dollars to go up. Now, why is that? That's because we're looking at this now from an international perspective. So if we go back to our handy-dandy handout, we can see right here that other countries want U.S. goods when our interest rate is higher. Okay, so when our interest rate goes up, there's going to be a demand for U.S. dollars. Now, one other way you can think of that, now we're thinking about investment again, but now we're thinking about in terms of the lender, not the borrower. When the interest rate goes up, dollars are going to be demanded so that they can be lent. In other words, if someone's in Japan and has money to loan, they're going to want to loan the money in America, in the U.S., because the interest rates are higher. So they're going to want to exchange their yen for U.S. dollars, loan the money in the U.S., because that's where they're going to get more of a return on their loan. So now we're thinking of investment from the other perspective. When the interest rates go up, it's going to increase the demand for American or U.S. financial assets. So let's jump back over to where we are. So we want to first say that the increase in interest rate will increase the demand for the country's financial assets or the country's currencies. Now, and then we want to say that the demand for the country's currency will increase. Now let me jump back and see if I actually have a graph for that. Don't know if I do or not. Let's see. That's not what I wanted to show you. I wanted to show you, let's see. Well, this is the graph from your handout that's going to talk about the exchange rates. But for the part right here, this is where I want to make sure that we don't get confused here. Explain what will happen to the demand for the country's currency in the foreign exchange market. And let's just make sure I'm showing you the right. So in the foreign exchange market, it's really hard. You have to know, you have to know that when the, let's jump back over here, that when the interest rates go up, right, that's going to cause the exchange rate to go up. So there's a lot of moving parts here, but if you know that the exchange rate, that the value of the dollars is going up because the dollar is going to be more in demand, then you know then you can easily see on the graph over here that that's going to increase the demand. Well, the demand, this is sort of like what comes first, the chicken or the egg? Well, the actual price of the money going up is going to increase the demand, because lenders are going to want U.S. dollars in order to lend and make more money. And I've already explained how that works from the perspective of the foreign markets. If you have if you have any foreign currency that is not as valuable, or you're going to want, I'm going to say it like this, you're going to want to exchange, for example, here, yen for dollars, if the dollars can be lent or, can be invested in America for a higher return, because the interest rates are going up, okay? Now, almost done here. I hope I haven't totally confused you. So, part two here, the value, so explain how the interest rates going up, the real interest rates going up are going to affect the value of the country's currency. Well, understand that when the real interest rates go up, it's going to, and if you read over this here, this is very helpful all through here. And if you read what we're looking at here, the actual, the exchange rate, the exchange rate right here is the cost of in this case, the yen, right? The yen, because the currency in the denominator, which is dollars, is on the x-axis. Okay, so this is dollars, right? And $1 here, at this point right here, costs 100 yen. So that's because the quantity, let's see, the exchange rate is the cost of the other country's currency to one of the country in the graph, which is dollars, okay? So $1 can be purchased right here, and I'll jump back over here so it's easier to see, for 100 yen. Now, when the demand for dollars goes up, it's going to mean that if we just picture this shifted out, and I can grab something here if you want, something right like that. Whoops, that's not what I want. Let me undo that. Sorry. Let me just grab a little thing here. There we go, and then just show you here. So if we shift this out, right? If this whole demand shifts out, then obviously you're going to have a higher. You're going to have a higher equilibrium, and so $1 is going to cost 120 yen or 110 yen. So the value of the dollar against the yen, or in the case of our question, against any foreign currency, is going to go up. And so when we think about the foreign exchange market, we're thinking of the dollar against everything else. So when the dollar appreciates, we make the assumption that it's appreciating against every other currency in the world. That's not always true, but that's the assumption that we're making. So the value of the country's currency is going to appreciate, right? Not depreciate, appreciate, which means it gains in value. And the demand for and so when the demand shifts right, when the demand increases, then the value is going to increase, as I showed you right here on this graph. Okay? And that pretty much takes care of question 2. Once again, these graphs, this handout that I sent to you guys, and that you can find on your on Blackboard, if you look at if you look right here, the AP practice exam link, and I've got to log in real quick. Sorry about that. If you look right here, you can see this study guide. You can download it right here from AP practice exam right here if you don't have it already. Okay, so that's problem 2 in the free response 2. We'll come back and work on problem 3.